Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about, am I just making excuses? This is a big question that comes up for a lot of people when they are struggling to do the thing that they say they want to do. And it could be just about anything, any of the habit buildings, the self-care, the accomplishment in work, whatever it is. It's often perceived as I'm self-sabotaging. I'm making excuses. I'm not trying hard enough. And then it spirals into these questions of, well, maybe I don't want it enough. What's wrong with me that I'm making excuses and I'm not doing the thing? And that feels really crappy. And it blocks our understanding of what's really going on. But there's a very good reason that we have that programming. For funsies, I looked up on Google quotes about excuses, and it pulled a whole bunch of memes that really emphasized one of the big reasons why we have this questioning around, is this an excuse? Am I making excuses? What's going on here? I'll share some of those quotes with you just so you can kind of hear the energy there. You can have results or excuses, not both. If it's important to you, you will find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse. An excuse is nothing more than a self-imposed roadblock. Maturity is when you stop complaining and making excuses in your life. Make an effort, not an excuse. Save the excuses. It's not about having time, it's about making time. If it matters, you will make the time. As long as you keep making excuses, you prevent yourself from getting out of the situation you're in. So, okay, that's enough of that. You hear the energy there, though. There's a certain aspect of this that is accurate. However, the energy is very shame-based motivation. And shame-based motivation leads to fear of failure. And fear of failure is one of the big reasons why people don't do a thing. So in this episode, I want to talk about this idea of excuses and what's going on here. Because there are very real reasons that we don't get to something. But then when we start to question if it's an excuse or maybe it's become an excuse, what's going on? How do we overcome this excuse thing? How do we engage what's really happening without beating ourselves up and obscuring very real obstacles? So in this episode, we are going to talk about what is an excuse, reasons people make excuses, taking the label off of our identity, how to stop making excuses, and supporting aligned action. If you are struggling with any of these things, it's a big piece of what I help people work on. Again, not that it's excuses, but really getting to what's going on and going past the shame-based motivation into real action that feels supportive and even more motivating. So if that's something you're looking for, I'm going to give some tips around how to process as you notice some of the things related to excuses. But if this is something you want more support on, this is a big piece of what I do, helping you get past the messaging that is creating blocks and engage the real obstacles so that you are moving forward in a way that's supportive and not full of shame, because that's not fun. Nobody likes that. So if you're interested in support, grab a spot on my calendar, and without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. Part of the reason I wanted to talk about this isn't just because it comes up a lot with clients, but also because of the societal energy and the energy in my own industry around this idea of when we're making excuses. And there's a lot of shoulding that happens when it comes to what you're able to accomplish. And there's a lot of obscuring of very real external obstacles that make it much harder to do the things, such that maybe it's how quickly or not quickly we're moving toward a particular goal or our ability to accomplish something, that we then start to think of it as an excuse and we start to tell the story about ourselves that makes it really hard to understand what's really going on. A lot of shaming comes into play here, and shaming is demotivating. Even though most of us have learned to use shame as a motivating tool, it doesn't work. One of the big reasons why we make excuses is because of fear of failure, and fear of failure is a byproduct of shame as motivation, because we are much more likely to be afraid of things not working out when we are beating ourselves up around being able to do something. A colleague of mine posted a quote by Susan C. Young the other day that I thought was a really interesting example of how we kind of blur that line between responsibility and excuse. The quote is, "You are the author of your own life story. You have the leading role and get to determine how you interact with your supporting cast and other characters. Without realizing it, you may have allowed the events in your life to write your story for you rather than taking deliberate action to write it in your own voice. What will it take to love your life story to create the happy endings you desire?" So, first of all, I want to acknowledge that the idea of happy endings is in and of itself kind of an issue, because what is happy and what is an ending and what does that even mean? But more importantly, I believe in the power of consciously choosing how you show up. I talk about it plenty, right? But in this quote, there's this underlying message that is very easy to take as a blame, which is, well, you allowed events in your life to write your story for you, and you didn't take deliberate action to write it yourself, which is why you're not happy. So you just need to be more deliberate and be more intentional and write your own story as though everything is in your power. There's a lot in your power, but not everything. So my response to that was, stories are so powerful. The stories we tell about ourselves and the stories we tell about other people absolutely influence the way we engage the circumstances we face. I think it's important to remember that our individual stories are inextricably tied to our social stories. Acknowledging that mutual impact allows us to maybe not love the story, but feel empowered to make choices that expand the love in it. So this is where I think we get blurry when it comes to, is this a reason? Am I understanding what's happening, or am I making an excuse? Now, oftentimes we'll think about excuses as things that repetitively block us, right? We say, I want to do this thing, but there's always a reason I don't do the thing. The issue within this is that we live in an over-individualized society, whereby we are pushed to take responsibility for things that are not actually our responsibility. When we have blurred the difference between what is ours and what isn't ours, what impacted us and what creates an obstacle for us external to us versus what we actually have power over, we limit our ability to do something about the situation. So then what happens is that when real life circumstances happen, we take on all the blame. We think it's all our fault. It's all us, or not all ours, like not at all ours and everybody else's. So it's this dichotomy between the either or kind of situation. And that limits our ability to do anything different. Both of those do. Because when it's all our fault, the shaming comes into play. And we don't actually recognize where we don't have power. Because that's just as important as recognizing where we do have power. Because if we are taking responsibility for things that aren't actually our responsibility, we're going to become overwhelmed because that thing that isn't our responsibility is bigger than us. It's outside of us. So our agency doesn't extend to it. And we end up running in circles. So let's talk about the definition of an excuse. Like, what is an excuse? And as I mentioned, it's this thing usually that is a repetitive thing, right? It's not okay, this happened this one time. Usually it's, okay, this keeps not happening. So an excuse is something offered as justification or grounds for being excused. To make excuses is an expression of regret for failure to do something. So we've already failed here, right? Like, I feel regret for failing. And now it's exacerbated my fear of failure because I think, well, I'm already prepared to fail because I've already failed once. So when something doesn't work out, or we have a repetitive things not working out for whatever reason, we start to internalize that. We have this regret of failure, and now we fear failure even more because we've already experienced it. It feels yucky. We're used to it. So this is how not accomplishing something can actually become a habit. We internalize that, oh, I can't do this, instead of getting curious about it. Most of our society is geared up around judgment, so judgment and curiosity don't exist in the same space. So when we're in that judgmental, oh, it's my fault, we're not going to get curious about it. So an excuse is this explanation of the absence of accomplishment, the absence of action. It's making an apology for something, and it's also trying to remove blame from. So I'm feeling bad. I feel regret. I feel bad that I didn't do the thing. I don't want to feel bad, so I'm going to try and find a reason for it to deflect from my own guilt and my own shame, because, shame, motivation, right? I want to deflect from that and forgive myself or diminish the importance of it. That's what it is to make an excuse. Forgive or disregard as of trivial import. So excuses make sense as a way to deflect the pain of failure. And then again, it can become this habit of deflection or avoidance of the pain of failure, because the more it's expected, the more we are prepared to process it, and the harder it is to do something different, because then there could be failure that I have not prepared for. It just feels safer to have failure, to have the pain of failure that than the unknown. So we run into this fear of the unknown, fear that we're going to fail, and this development of a lack of self-trust. We start to teach ourselves that we can't do the thing instead of looking at what is actually going on here. Because sometimes, as a mom, there are plenty of things that happen that it's really a choice of what needs to take priority right now, or what is my capacity? What is my energetic capacity? What is my emotional capacity? What is my physical capacity? And those things matter, and they're different at different times for different people. So this is where, that idea of, well, if it's really important, then you'll make time for it. Yes, and it doesn't acknowledge that there are lots of things that are really important. And there are certain places where we're just not going to sacrifice. The problem is that we don't actually look at the dynamics, because all we're taught is to shame ourselves. So we want to push that shame away by making that excuse. And then we start to question, oh my God, am I making an excuse? Is this become an excuse when there are choices that are being made because there are things that really are important? What our capacity is, and what our values are, and what our priorities are. So we limit our ability to make choices because of all of this fear and pressure and shaming and all of that stuff. So is it an excuse? Isn't it an excuse? Does it really matter? I mean, in a way it does. But I think just that term becomes a story that we tell ourselves. And then that story turns into a story about who we are. And so it's more about the pattern that we're creating in our life around the judgment of an excuse rather than what is or isn't an excuse at all. In some ways, I kind of think about this as I'm going through it going, well, maybe we just need to stop talking about it like that because it's so weighted with judgment that it makes it really hard to find a way forward that feels loving and supports us. Sometimes it is an excuse, but it's because what we think we want isn't what we really want. There's a misalignment. Sometimes it's because we have unreasonable expectations of what we can accomplish and we haven't been taught how to be flexible because everything is so external and goal-oriented and the motivation is so shame-based that we're not given the space to get curious and to explore and to be okay with changing our minds and deciding that something is different than we thought it was or whatever, to actually listen to ourselves. So I put it to you, what do you think about the idea of excuses? And should we even keep that terminology? Is it helpful? Is it helpful to look at ourselves and go, oh, you're just making excuses? I kind of feel like it's not, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that. My thought in exchange for this idea of talking about excuses and judging ourselves around excuses is to look at developing an understanding and making choices. So going back to that idea that I mentioned before, what is your responsibility? What isn't? So what do you actually want, or what do you think you want, and why? What is important to you about that? And what stopped you? And what part of that is your responsibility? And I talk about responsibility is kind of broken down as responsibility. It is the ability to respond. Your ability to respond is where your power is. It's your ability to make choices related to whatever is going on internally, externally, whatever it is. Without choices, you only have the ability to react. So I'm going to say that again. Without choices, you only have the ability to react, which is a very understandable thing, right? Like, if you can't perceive choice, if you don't have room to decide based on information, process what's going on, process what's yours, what's not yours, make a decision, then all you can do is react. And that's okay. So this is where we start to judge ourselves. Oh, I reacted and I didn't do the thing. Well, okay, what were you reacting to? Were there choices available? Are there choices now? Maybe there weren't then because you just didn't have the capacity. You only had the ability to react because whatever was going on blocked your ability to see choice. So now that it's past, we're here and we can go, okay, so what happened? And what do I want to do the next time? So you're in a space where you have more ability to choose. You're in a space where you have more reflection and exploration of what options might be available to you. But the problem is that when we talk about excuses and we start to beat ourselves up and we start to shame ourselves, then we don't have the ability to choose. We're still in reaction. So naturally, we're just going to do the same thing again. Maybe it's trying to do what we keep trying to do, even though it's not what we actually want to do. Maybe it's not moving us towards what we really want. Maybe it's that we're not setting reasonable expectations for ourselves. Whatever it is that's going on, life happens. Our ability to navigate the curveball and keep moving, or allow that curveball to inform us and maybe we shift what we're doing. All of that's important, but if we're in that beating ourselves up, judgmental, shameful space to try and push ourselves to do the things, our ability to choose has been diminished. The ability to hear ourselves and what we need has been diminished. And the more diminished that is, the less ability we have to respond. And the more reactive we're going to be, naturally. So going back to focusing on understanding what's going on. Look for the patterns. Look for the feelings that are coming up. Maybe it's feelings you can name. Maybe it's vibrations in your body. Maybe it's messaging, maybe it's pulls. What are the priorities? What are the values? What is drawing you to do one thing and what is creating resistance to doing another thing? What is the story? Because so much of this becomes story. When we are frequently not doing the thing, we might start to tell a story about ourselves in relation to that thing. It becomes a habit of avoidance. When we have a series of things that keeps you from doing something, you build up the sense that there's some sort of danger in it. Like you must not be doing it for a reason related to doing the thing versus the circumstances that are preventing you from doing the thing and navigating it. So there's a lot of stories that you are subconsciously going to start telling because our brains are wired to protect us. And that fear of failure feels like pain. Emotional pain sits in the same part of the brain as physical pain, especially if it relates to other people and the potential judgment of other people. That's another big one. And then we start to turn it into our identity as another form of protection. Well, I'm just a procrastinator, or this is just my personality. And we use that idea of who we are as an excuse, because that is a place where we make an excuse. Again, trying to defer blame. It's just the way it is. It's just who I am, because it reduces the shame involved with whatever choices that you are not consciously making. So when we can take it out of that identity piece, okay, up until this point, I have not done the thing. What's been stopping me? Why do I want to do this thing? What is it about this thing that's important to me? What else could I do to get that thing that's important to me? What could I do to support myself in getting the thing or doing the thing that I say I want to do? These are the kinds of questions where you get curious about what's going on instead of going, well, it's just the way it is. It is just who I am. Take it out of the identity piece. It's a form of self-preservation from the judgment that is inherent within our society, allowing that to be released and say, yes, up until this point, I have done this. And maybe I will find that actually I want to keep doing this. The more you can access that choice, the more power you will feel. And choice, again, is rooted in your ability to know what is actually in your power and what isn't. And then find the energy that moves you within that. Like, what is motivating this? What is important about this? Releasing that shame as motivational. I'm just going to beat myself up enough to do the thing. Obviously, that's not working. If shame was going to motivate you, you probably would have done the thing by now. So let's let that go too. And look at, okay, well, what does motivate you? When you actually do something, when you accomplish something, what motivates you? Now, you may find that that energy is not the energy you want to utilize, but maybe it will help you make that transition to start doing something. I'll give you an example here. I have a client who wants to exercise more. And she is motivated when people say, you can't do that. She is motivated when people are relying on her for something. So she does use that fight energy. I'm going to fight my way. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to do the thing. So this fight energy is what works for her to get her to do something. For her movement practice, she's looking to do yoga and more centering, calm, stretching and movement. The issue is that is counter to the energy that gets her to do things. So, all right, let's use that fight energy and do something that resonates with that fight energy to get you doing something so that you can start showing yourself that you can do the thing. And then once you have that habit going from that space, then you can shift to doing other forms of movement that feel supportive. So being able to engage one thing, building one habit instead of trying to shift two things. So building an action habit first and then a mindset habit, or building a mindset habit and then an action habit. You've got to find what works for you. But again, all of these things are rooted in removing that shame, removing that story about who you are, and the ways in which you've learned to deflect from the pain of some of those stories. I have several other episodes, including coaching episodes, where I dig further into that idea of habits and using care to shift habits instead of using shame to shift habits. One of them is called Deep Self-Care to Shift Habits. I know, that's a surprise. That's the title. That is about moving away from the stop it or just do it model, which really isn't sustainable, and getting caught up in that space of personality and who we are, but being able to look at, how do I support myself? How do I care for myself as I lean into doing something different? So checking out that episode. And then the other episode that I would point you towards is It's Simple, So Why Am I Not Doing It?, where I do some coaching with someone who wants to write a book and can't figure out why she isn't, because she actually wants to do it. And we dig into getting that clarity to motivate action and creating obstacles to action. And what do you do about that? And releasing the control and attachment to outcome and developing self-trust through taking action. So really, again, it's getting curious, seeking understanding, and then seeking choice, and then making those choices. Rather than worrying about, are you making an excuse? Take a look at those pieces. Put the excuse piece aside, put the I am piece aside, and take a look at what it is that you want, why, and what's stopping you. What part of that is in your responsibility and what part of it isn't. Not beating yourself up for not being able to do it previously, but what would it take to move toward it, even just one small step? Or is it even something that you want to move towards? Is there a different way? Maybe that's not the way. Maybe there's a different way. So allowing yourself to get curious, develop an understanding of yourself and of the situation, and engaging where you can make choice. If you want support with any of this, if you're running into a block with it and you're feeling stuck, that is what I am here for. That's what I help people with, and I would love to support you. If you would like to, you are more than welcome to hop on a free exploration call with me, and we'll take a look at what's going on and get curious about it. Sometimes, really, it is just having that outside person who can see things a little bit more clearly beyond the emotional and internalized stories, and help you access an awareness that you have. It's just been blocked by all that other garbage. So if you'd like, my calendar is available. It's in the show notes, and I will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot, and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend, or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.